Okay, hello everyone, welcome to our participants online. And you cannot see it here, but there is a room full of people here, so welcome everyone. Thanks for participating in our sustainability transition dialogue. As a short note, this has been organized in a format that is a usual format for the TRAJECTS Center. So you can watch a lot of our dialogues in our YouTube channel. You can look for TRAJECTS events and look at previous dialogues. And this is the same place where we would upload this dialogue. So I will be your moderator today. My name is Paola Yanguas. I am one of the academic coordinators of the TRAJECTS Center in the European Hub, but I am also a PhD researcher at the FossilExit group, and the topic that we have here today is very close to my research area, which is coal exit, coal phase out, and in particular, we have an excellent panel bringing perspectives that are a little bit different from the perspectives we usually have in Germany about coal phase out, which are global South countries. Two of our researchers, Ana María and Lisa, they are also TRAJECTS fellows who are doing a research stay as part of the program. So we're very, very honored to be able to have it. And Rajeev, he is doing also a research stay, but with another organization in Hamburg, and came all the way to Berlin to be with us today. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to our panel. Lisa from Indonesia, who's been a couple of months now here in Germany. It's a senior researcher in Indonesia who has worked on several climate and energy policy issues, including related to the process of the Just Energy Partnership in Indonesia, but also has participated in international negotiations, has been in contact with the G20 organization of the summit when it happened in Indonesia, and has a background on economics and climate and energy, and will tell us more about her research today. Rajeev, on the other hand, is joining us, or is coming from India, and he has had a research that is more based with local communities in coal-affected regions. He has done a lot of work with all sorts of stakeholders in coal mining areas, and has developed or has started to develop policy tools for approaching just transition processes in the global South. And finally, Ana María, who usually lives in Colombia, is also visiting us for a couple of months in Germany. She worked or has worked a lot on the energy sector, and wrote a PhD focusing on the impacts of electricity generation on different territories, communities, and now is working closely with the new Colombian government on the topic of energy communities, which she already presented a few sessions ago here. So thank you so much for being here. That's all from my side now. I'm going to launch a question to the three of you to let you do an open statement. And that question is, in your opinion and based on your research and your experience, what are the main 2 or 3 challenges that your country has to achieve a just transition out of coal? And I'll start in the same way I introduced you. First Lisa, then Rajeev, and then Ana María.
Thank you, Paula. So I'm working in Indonesia in a just transition partnership involving in the negotiation process. That, as you may know that Indonesia has received a 20 billion fund in the G20 negotiation last year. And when I have been involved intensively in the process, I've seen there are so many challenges and opportunities, but in terms of the challenges, well, I have the slides. I'm not sure if it can be fleshed out here, but the first thing, when we talk about the energy transition, Indonesia is really heavily relying on coal in the power sector internally, domestically in Indonesia, but also in the export in terms of the income of the countries from export. And secondly, also, when we talk about the just energy transition, there is a skill and development gaps that still happening in the country, because in the coal region in Indonesia, the development of the economy is not as improved as in the other cities that they have other source of income, not from mining sectors or like agricultural sectors. Last but not least, what I see in the process of the JETP negotiation, most of the targets of the JETP still focusing on the techno-economic side of renewables, mostly talking about the large scales of renewables, which is when we talk about just itself, the justice itself, it won't touch more on the communities. So it's mostly what I think of is more than just supporting the private sector, replacing their businesses from coal mining to other sectors that will be profit-making oriented as well. So I think those are three things that I've seen as the big challenges in the process of JETP negotiation in the Indonesian context.
Talking about India, our transition away from coal is not going to be an easy task for India. A country with, more than 200 years of coal history and high socioeconomic and energy dependency, it is going to be difficult for India. And however, considering the urgency of climate crisis and the commitment of India to net zero targets by 2070, it is also going to be inevitable for India. And if you look at, the journey India has embarked on, particularly related to the renewable energy program, and when the, coal starts to decrease, and I'm not talking about, in a year or two or in 5 years, maybe in a decade or so, this will be, a problem for coal regions if we do not plan just transition simultaneously. So one of the primary challenges that India faces, in terms of, mitigating the impact of, mine closure on coal communities and workers. Because apart from, the formal workers, we have a huge informal dependency on the coal sector. And a recent study by, National Foundation of India, it estimates that more than 30 million people are, directly and indirectly dependent on the coal sector in India. And important proportion are, the women workers, marginalized workers, and migrant workers who are vulnerable groups, because, the formal workers have job security and other social security benefits. But it is the informal workers who are like most impacted when a mine gets closed. And this high dependency is, there in states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Odisha. Jharkhand is a state where I come from. So it will be important that going forward, these vulnerable groups are included in the planning process. And secondly, the challenge India faces is related to stakeholder engagement, particularly of the local communities and institutions. Most of the discussions, related to just transition is happening still at, the top level, and And there's a wide disconnect between, the discussions that are happening at the top and, awareness and engagement of people at the local level. So it will be important that how the important stakeholders, for example, the local related to local governance, panchayats, village councils, and civil society organizations, unions are engaged in the process. And thirdly is, the revenue that comes from coal. It is very a substantial and essential, a part of, revenue that, central government and state government get from coal. And also at district level, we have district mineral fund and the local CSR fund, which is like dependent on, coal. So it will be important that how, we identify and develop alternate sources of revenue for the government and also for the local community at local level. And, promoting industries related to renewable, and also, how we can harness the local potential will be important. For example, in most of the mining districts, there is, immense potential to, create sustainable industries related to agriculture and forest, and also, fisheries, tourism. And so overall, addressing these challenges will require, robust approaches, and how, we can have the right kind of policy frameworks and reforms, economic diversification, and also the most important, multi-stakeholder cooperation going forward.
Well, I think that the three challenges for FossilExit in Colombia are regarding mainly because Colombia is the third largest coal exporter in the world. So we're going to have an economic impact due to the decrease in income coming from the hydrocarbon sector for the energy transition. But even if we don't make an effort for energy transition, because as well, if the international price of coal decrease, we're going to be affected. So the economical impact are going to be with or without energy transition for my country. The second challenge I think is very relevant, but also it's a social impact, is regarding the job reconversion. What are going to do the people that has been working on coal or had been working on fossil all his life and its territory work regarding that fossil? And the third one, it's also an electrical issue, and is maintain the reliability of the electrical system without the support of the firm energy that comes from the fossil. This is also really important because the Colombian system is most hydropower, but its energy in comes from the fossil. In the way we are not going to have fossil support, we have to increase the matrix to other renewables that maybe are going to demand more land, and demand more land are going to imply more conflict due the access of the territory. So I think, like summarizing, these are going to be the three challenges for the FossilExit in Colombia.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So obviously, three very different countries. Colombia depending on coal mostly for exports. India being a net importer of coal, and but heavily consuming coal for its rapidly increasing energy needs. And Indonesia depending on both fronts, on the national consumption and on the exports. They're definitely different countries, but from your statements, I still see a lot of commonalities. We can reflect on that later on, but we'll have first some follow-up questions to your statements. And I'll start with Lisa, because you mentioned the JETP. For those of you who don't know what that means, is the Just Energy Transition Partnership, and it's an international cooperation and support mechanism to help Indonesia move away from coal, which at the moment still negotiated, but it's around $20 million that are being currently negotiated and will be implemented, directed towards a just transition. How do you think this partnership and this amount of funding can help to overcome some of the challenges that you just mentioned? I know financial support was one, but in general, what do you think this partnership could be good for and could help?
Yeah, so actually we received 20 billion US dollar. But in terms of the funding, it's still small amount. So if we want to close all the coal fleets in the country by 2040, we need 37 billion US dollar. With the 20 billion, we use that for coal phase out or coal retirement, but for other things. So it's very small amount for Indonesia actually to support the just or energy transition. But with the Just Energy Transition Partnership, the Indonesian government works with relevant stakeholders, and we are increasing our climate ambition. So in the past, we have 29% target of NDC by 2030. Now we have 32. And we cap our power sector emission at 390 megaton CO2. Now it's in 290. So we see that the energy transition in terms of JETP is more ambitious. So I hope that will support us in terms of moving away from coal and more on renewables. But secondly, when we speak again with the justice itself, just energy transition, so I really hope that JETP support will look into the social impacts. So we'll see how the support can also make more than just emission reduction. So like economic and social empowerment will also be considered. Like I'm doing research on how the economic diversification can be implemented. So I think JETP is a good opportunities for Indonesia to help the local government to find their economy reliance. To not to rely on the mining sector anymore, find other opportunities for expanding their economic diversification. And that could be something also good for the country as a national country, that in the future we don't have to rely on, like I mentioned today in our informal conversation, we don't have to rely on India for importing coal to Indonesia or to other countries that are still consuming coal. So I think that's going to be a good chance for Indonesia to use JETP for other than climate change, but also for economic and social impacts.
Thank you, Lisa. So actually our online audience has more questions for you already. So keep those thoughts about the JETP. We'll talk about that in the Q&A. But now moving to Rajeev, India, obviously being a huge producer and consumer, still more skeptic about talking about a deal to decrease coal, or to put a phase-out date of coal. Actually was blocking the framing of phasing out coal and watering it down to phasing down coal in the international climate negotiations. So India has been a lot more shy, I would say, than Indonesia and other countries when it comes to talking about phasing out coal or JETPs. Within this situation, but with the needs of local communities, which you already mentioned, what mechanisms for international cooperation do you think could be useful to support a just transition, even outside the framework of the climate change negotiations?
Yeah, India has been resistant to, signing the JETP deal. And considering the, magnitude of transformation India will require, and the funds required will be much bigger for that, and I'm not going into that. There are like ways in which international cooperation can really foster knowledge and also technological exchange, which can support just transition in India. And this could be with north South cooperation and also South-South collaboration and between governments and different research bodies, even people, industry. An example in this context is, IKI JT project. Most of us might know. It's a project which is led by GIZ, and it's a consortium of different institutions, government, research institution, labor union, and how it is helping the global South countries, for example, Indonesia, India, Colombia, and other countries, to develop plans related to just transition and also supporting regional interventions. In India, the project is supporting 2 districts in Jharkhand state. And then you have the financial institution like the World Bank, which is also supporting the Coal Ministry of India in having a mine closure framework and also scaling up the renewable energy program of India. At state level, if I talk about the government task force on just transition in Jharkhand state, particularly, they are also collaborating with international institutions. For example, they have collaborated with UNDP to help them with knowledge and policy support to develop a roadmap for the state. So and South, what India can really learn, with the kind of stakeholder engagement that is happening in countries who have signed the ZP deal, and also tailor it in context of its own region to include local institutions and civil society organizations, unions in the process. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a hopeful view. So not everyone needs 20 billion partnership, not million, but there are other ways that subnationals and national organizations can cooperate. Thank you for that. And now, Ana Maria, Colombia has a change of government recently. In this government, it started taking a lot more progressive attitude towards eliminating fossil fuels, and recently it joined the Power and Coal Alliance, giving a strong signal to the phase out of coal. However, this will require scaling up quite a lot. Renewable energy generation, which you already mentioned, and there, for sure, there is a lot of resistance from local communities to the expansion of renewable energies. How do you think, this challenge could be overcome to be able to phase out coal and expand renewable energies in a just way?
Well, I think democratization of the energy system will be relevant to the local acceptance of the projects. However, democratization are going to imply that people understand what we're talking about. I mean, it not just say that we are going to open the system, but really provide the opportunities in which people could participate, and also that imply that people understand why we're doing this. It's not just because someone say we need to change because of the climate, but really understand what it's behind of this. So this is one of my hypotheses of my research always is like, it's important that people understand why, and because when you understand the why, it's feasible that people produce its own solutions. We cannot model all the solutions for all the people because that's going to be impossible. So democratization are going to apply the citizens' participation, but also that they could access to transparent information, understand that renewables has a lot of benefits, but also some risk in the way that we only sell the good idea of the renewables. We are making a big mistake regarding the paradigm behind energy, because people are going to think that we are like saying just one part of the story, and access to reliable information and transparent are going to be essential in this change of paradigm. And also, renewables are going to demand more land, because for the power density, the capacity of energy production of the hydrocarbon are higher per square meter, yes, thank you, than renewables. That implies that they are going to be demand more land. So in the way we don't change the paradigm regarding energy access and energy production, it's going to be the same problem with different technologies, not fossil, but renewable. So it's important the promotion of schemes of generation energy at a small scale, not only at the big infrastructure that we used to have in the last century, but an small scale, because are going to be very relevant regarding the access to the land. And also the programs and the kind of cooperation that we're going to need have the focus in the development of local capacities more than the installation of infrastructure. Infrastructure, clearly it's important, but also how communities are going to use that infrastructure. The energy per se doesn't have the potential to solve the problems if we don't use the energy for I know, for something useful. So it's not only the infrastructure, but also how we're going to use it. It's going to be really important, all these factors in the acceptance of the renewable energies for local communities in Colombia.
Thank you. You were all very efficient, so we have some time to discuss, which is really good. Maybe I'll wrap up to see what similarities I see in all your questions about the challenges. So in one way or the other, you all mentioned one of and how this is different, for instance, to what I've seen or we see in Germany. So the first thing would be this high socioeconomic dependency, being countries where a lot of the sustainable development goals, including energy access and many others, they're still not guaranteed. So talking about the just transition in a way means overcoming those socioeconomic challenges and moving to a system, renewable based or whatever, that guarantees that this progress in socioeconomic indicators is not stopped, which is quite difficult because of issues like informal economies that are present in all of these extraction areas. And it's also not easy because it seems like all countries have developed a coal sector or that is based on a model of exports of low added value and limited value chains, which makes them be in a vulnerable position to a sudden decrease or a stark decrease in exports because of those rents that will fall. And third thing that I see as a common challenge is the lack of financial support. So because of all the challenges, the means required to finance this are quite high, but at the same time, access to financial support is very limited, even under models such as the JET piece. And last but not least, because of the realities of local stakeholders, if this whole thing is perceived as unfair or as imposed from the outside and people don't understand why this is happening, there might be big backslashes in the implementation of a transition, and the probability that it's a just transition, it's really low. So thank you so much for for giving us all those reflections on the challenges. Now I'm gonna give you a last question reflecting on those common challenges that seem to be present in the different countries, and that would be, how do you think exchange and cooperation, what opportunities do you see for exchange and cooperation between countries in the global south that have those very specific challenges? What do you think could be opportunities for this cooperation? And if you have any good ideas of good practices where this exchange is already happening, if you could share it with us. So to change, let's start with you, Ana Maria, and then we move to Lisa. Or do we need more time? Think about, yeah, okay.
Okay. Well, I think that there's a lot of opportunities of cooperation, more because sometimes it's unfair when say why is not working these policies in the global south. And the answer is because it weren't designed for the global south. I mean, could be something quite obvious, but it how it been happen. So I think that when you have this kind of conversation with people with similar social scenarios, it's more easy to understand the real context and how you could approach it in a policy with an efficient impact. So good practices always are going to be relevant. For example, the kind of transport, there's some geographical reasons about why we don't develop the kind of transport that Europe has. But for example, Indonesia or India or the global south had similarities in the geographical issues. So it's not just the social context, but also the geographical and the physical. So I think there's a lot of cooperation opportunities. I don't have one idea in this moment about what kind of thing, but sure, I think that the conversations between people working in the global south, it's really important, not only trying to reply what is working on the north, but also what we could design from the south to the south. So, who's next?
Yeah, I think you explained it very well. There are like common challenges the global south countries have. For example, high inequality in mining regions, and then high proportion of informality that exists in our countries, and also weak institutional capacities and within the different contexts that we have, political and socio-economic context with respect to each country. But it will be important that how the cross-country lessons can help each other, particularly on initiatives related to some of the best practices that is underway in countries like Indonesia, South Africa, or Colombia, and also other regions like from the north or and south, and how the countries can learn from the different policy design and approaches to different interventions related to economic diversification or stakeholder engagement, and the investment plan that they are having related to renewable energy. So I think it will be important going forward. We have exchange of knowledge and also technology to go ahead with in a better way to plan for just transition in respective country.
Okay, so most of the answers have been given by Anam and Rajeev, but yeah, I echoing them, especially when we talk about global south or global north. I don't think about like differentiation in terms of economic development, but it's more on the geographical location that we are sharing geographical like similarities, even though like maybe in terms of climate, it's gonna be maybe not the same. But in terms of social economic development, in terms of political economy, is similar. So with the South-South cooperation, there are actually many things can be done together, not just with the like government, learning from the other countries what has been doing. For example, in Indonesia, JETP will look into what South Africa has been doing because they started before us. But I think in terms of like cooperation with the think tank, civil society, academia, all people are involved in this just transition, that can be a good opportunities. And the next thing is to for me, it's a good opportunity to conduct the global advocacy for certain thing that has been overlooked. For example, here when I'm doing the research stay, I've developed or explore more on what the areas that has been overlooked in Indonesia. And I thought that that was important. For example, we talk about innovation, technology, and when we speak about just transition in Indonesia, it was not there yet. But when I learn from other countries, it's been in their discussion. So I can use that as something to say to my colleagues in Indonesia that it's in other countries as well. And also to the promotion of the involvement of other sectors. So this is not just about the responsibilities of people who are working in the energy sector, but also those are actually can be involved in the just transition. For example, I've just had this discussion last week about what could be the areas that has never been thought about it before in terms of just transition. Arts. We never know how arts can be involved in the just transition, but we found there is actually the entailment of that. And that's what I learned from the South-South cooperation, because I see how, for example, arts has been used for a promotion of just transition to people who do not know about just transition and the justice that they have actually the rights to speak about their their rights in the communities when there is a building of renewables or some energy projects, for example. So that's I hope that's adding more information in terms of the South-South cooperation that can be done in the future.
Yes, thank you all. Because it will be a bit difficult to pass the mic around. We're gonna stop the recording now for our online audience. So this will be the part that could be watched afterwards, but the participants online can stay in any case for the Q&A, and we will start with them.